The University of Miami Law School Entertainment Arts and Sports Law program presents the Leadership Game Plan. I'm executive producer and program director Greg Levy, and now over to our host, longtime NFL coordinator, head coach, three-time Grey Cup champion, NCAA champion with the Miami Hurricanes, Miami Law graduate, and now adjunct faculty member, Coach Marc Trestman.
I believe that everyone can lead, no matter who you are or what you do. I believe, just like quarterbacks, leaders are not born, they are developed. With so many platforms to speak our minds, there are countless ways to lead and impact the lives of others. So how we lead in this accelerating and interconnected world will determine our present and our future. That's why leadership today matters more than ever. Welcome to the Leadership Game Plan, where we go beyond the X's and O's through the unique lens of our accomplished guests. I'm your host, Marc Trestman, and let's get started. Alonzo Highsmith has been on an amazing journey. University of Miami football legend, NFL player, professional boxer, NFL executive, and now the general manager of the University of Miami football operations. Alonzo attended high school in Miami at Christopher Columbus High School. It was the fall of 1982 when Alonzo enrolled at the University of Miami. He was a standout linebacker who chose his hometown Hurricanes over offers from Notre Dame and the University of Michigan. I was the new quarterbacks coach, having just graduated law school, and recall running into Alonzo for the first time in the Heck Center. It was obvious he had the presence and charisma, but would soon show his selfless leadership when he converted from linebacker to fullback as Coach Schnellenberger convinced him that this was in the best interest of the team, despite him being one of the highest ranked defensive players in the nation earlier that year. We would go on to win the national championship in 1983, Alonzo's freshman year, and he led the team in rushing during the 31-30 win over Nebraska in the Orange Bowl and a national championship. Alonzo was drafted with the third overall pick in the first round of the 1987 draft. He spent 5 years in the NFL with his career being cut short by chronic knee injuries. Following his NFL career, Alonzo became a professional boxer, amassing a 27-1-2 record as a heavyweight before landing back in the NFL as a front office executive. Since 2012, Alonzo has spent time with the Packers, the Browns, and the Seattle Seahawks in a variety of executive positions before landing back home at the U in the summer of 2022 as the general manager of football operations. I am absolutely thrilled to kick off season 3 by welcoming my good friend Alonzo Highsmith to the Leadership Game Plan podcast. Alonzo Highsmith, it's been 40 years.
Yes, it has.
And we've done kind of a circle of life. We're back where we both started, and I'm so proud of you, grateful that you take some time with us today to be with us on the Leadership Game Plan. And let's just jump right into it.
Okay.
You've been on a long and winding road. You've experienced probably everything that you could experience in sports and in your life. And we always start with basically, how you look at leadership, how you define it, and your role as a leader now.
Yeah.
Just some basic thoughts as we jump into this.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you. It's a pleasure being here. And it's great to be back with yourself because you were always kind of fond of me, I think, as a freshman. I tell people about the first time we ever met and we talked, and you said, come jogging with me one day. And I'm not a big jogger. I could run sprints all day. And you took me on a 3.5 mile jog around campus. And, I'm a competitive guy, and I didn't, I'm a freshman. I don't want him to go tell Howard Schnellenberger or something like, this guy, he's lazy, he won't. So I took off running, and I'll never forget, you told me I had you like 4 minutes ahead of your usual pace, and Eventually you caught me, but it's just the start of a lot of great things. And my other Marc Trestman story was after we won the national championship, I was at the Heck just walking through the building. Things are, there's so much media now, and there's so many things. I collected Sports Illustrated as a kid, and I never thought I'd ever be in Sports Illustrated or anything like that. But I was walking through the Heck, and you told me, hey, you need to go buy Sports Illustrated. I was like, why? He goes, you're the centerfold. And that picture is dear to my heart. And I always think about you when I look at that picture hanging in my office at my home in Houston, Texas. And I always tell my kids, I probably wouldn't even have known if it wasn't for Marc Trestman telling me to get that Sports Illustrated. So,
no team was ever higher.
No team was ever higher.
Your big body jumping over the pile.
Yeah, we've been friends ever since then, and it's been a great friendship. Thank you.
Yeah. So tell us about leadership. How do you look at leadership after so many years of being around some great ones and maybe not so great ones as well? What kind of perspective do you have?
Well, as far as leadership, I think leadership comes in so many different forms. So many great people lead in different ways. And I think one of the problems you have with leadership is people try and emulate where they've come from or what they perceive to be leadership instead of building their own identity as a leader. Leadership to me is about being able to make people better around you, people believing in who you are as an individual, and people knowing that you're willing to do the same work as them. I've always said this, there's different types of leadership, but I may put it in layman terms. There may be a specific way to say it, but I've always thought there was two types of leadership. There's leadership by authority, which says this guy holds this position so he can tell you what to do and how to do it. And there's the other type of leadership that it's common man leadership, that you're humble, you have a great perspective on reality, you believe in people, you encourage people, and you're willing to roll your sleeves up and people follow you. That's the type of leadership I've always been drawn to. People that are humble, people who have a passion for life, people who respect other people. And it's not about them. I've always said the greatest thing about leadership is being able to give more of yourself. And when you're a father of 5, I've been married 32 years, I found as a father, I have to be willing to give more of myself for the good of others. And I bring that type of leadership with me wherever I've been. I'm always willing to give more of myself for the greater good of team. And when you talk about leadership, I always think back to, I don't brag about myself, my football ability or anything like that. But I do remember being the best high school football player in America my senior year in high school. And I felt as though my path was to be Lawrence Taylor, Hugh Green, and these people, those type of defensive players. I didn't have any running backs on my wall in high school. It was all Lawrence Taylor and Hugh Green, and I wore number 99 because of Hugh Green and Wilbur Marshall and those guys. That's what I thought I was. And lo and behold, I signed with the University of Miami. I'm Defensive Player of the Year in America. And, I'm going to play defensive end, wear number 99. And lo and behold, Howard moves me to running back. And I cried at night because my whole life was based around football and being a good football player. And that's what I set out to do from the age of 8 years old. And I didn't want to do it. And Howard Schnellenberger brought me into his office. And I would have never made the switch if he had said, Alonzo, I'm doing this because you can win the Heisman Trophy. You can be this, you can be that. When he told me, Alonzo, I'm doing this, I want you to play fullback for me at the University of Miami because you will help make us a dominant team and we'll compete for national championships. that's why I want you to play fullback. And right then, I've always been a team player. My dad was a football coach. My dad always told me, you do what's best for the team. And that goes back to giving more of yourself. I feel as though I sacrificed a great deal for the good of the team. By playing a position I didn't play. You mess around as a kid growing up as a running back, but I thought I wasn't an average defensive player. Maybe you move an average defensive player over the offense to be a fullback. And I thought I was an elite linebacker. I thought I could have rewritten the books and records of what a linebacker is supposed to be. 6'1", 235 pounds, runs 4.4, can vertical jump 40 inches, could catch anybody on the field. That's where I thought I was. But then you move me to running back, and now I'm thinking, I've never played this thing. I don't even know what to do, And because of hard work, thinking about what Howard told me, everything Howard told me about playing running back and why I'm doing it, it was to make the team better. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to let down the running back coach. I didn't want to let down Howard Schnellenberger. I didn't want to let down my family by not being a good football player. So I worked my butt off to be the best running back in the nation. And then it became a challenge to me in the aspect of people said, well, you're never going to get drafted in the NFL now because you're playing running back. I said, no. I said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a good leader and lead by work ethic, accountability, and helping make this team better by being a fullback. And then I found out that I'm not going to be carrying the ball 25 times a game. So I said, you know what I'm going to do? I want to be like Albert Bentley. I'm going to dominate people blocking them. And then I said, well, you know what else I'm going to do? I'm going to catch the ball out of the backfield. All that not for me. I've never done anything for me. I did it for team. And when you say team and what type of leadership you are, I think it's about doing more for others than doing for yourself. And that's the only type of leadership I know. I respect people who don't look at themselves as anything more than you are. They respect people. They respect their family. They love their teammates. They love what they do. And they bring that with them every day to work. And it's important for them to be good because they want others to follow your example. And I think it's kind of simple, but it's hard to do because when you're a leader, there's things you have to do that you don't want to do every day. Being on time every day, being accountable every day, making sure people around you are positive and making sure that you stay positive when things aren't positive. And, in a simple way, that's basically how I see leadership in a lot of ways. You have to be able to make people around you better to be a good leader. And I do a few simple things in life. I treat my friends, colleagues, no different than I do my wife and kids. It's pretty simple. And I've always felt as though that was my key to leadership, treating everybody the same and demanding from them no different than what I would demand from myself.
Alonzo, you've hit on so many bullet points that we're going to try to talk about today. It started with, a leader can't replicate. He has to be authentic.
Yep.
He can't, somebody who coached for Bill Belichick, can't coach somebody else and be Bill Belichick. So, you can't duplicate authenticity. And so what you were saying is a leader has to be authentic. He has to be true to himself. He has to know who he is to be able to lead. And he can not only lead at work, but he can lead at home because really the values you give to your children are the same ones you give to those who follow you. and who you inspire through your leadership. And then you went all the way down to selflessness, that a leader has to be selfless in whatever he does and put the group before himself and before his title. And somewhere in between, you said something like, a leader can be competent. He can know how to do his job, but that doesn't mean he can lead. You know, he has to, and then you took it a step further. You really said a leader has to be humble. He has to be vulnerable. He has to be able to admit mistakes. So you covered a lot of the things that we cover early in the course, and it comes back to acting and using words and doing it in a way that you can back it up each and every day with your value system, which you talked about.
You know, one of the things I think about every day when I go to work is, especially when you're in a position where people perceive you a certain way in your job title, and you know this society is made of job titles. I've really not thought much of job titles, just a title, but I've often thought why it's important for me to be good at what I do, because I have a soft spot in my heart for people who work hard at what they do every day, but they have no voice. And by them having no voice means whatever happens to the team or the general manager affects their life. And I've seen some great employees get fired because of dumb decisions at the top. You know, if you're a general manager, it's important that I always make the right decisions with what's best for the organization, because I want to represent those people who have no voice. I want that guy's family and kids to go to the same high school for the next 10, 12 years. I think about that stuff. I think about those who won't have a decision in what we do in the organization, but by my decisions affect their lives.
Yeah, they're all interconnected. To winning on game day.
Exactly. So it's very important to me that I'm good at what I do, because I represent not just myself. I represent the organization. I represent the players. I represent all those people in the building whose lives can be changed overnight by poor decisions by me. And those are the things I think about as a leader and what I'm trying to accomplish. It's never about me. It's for the broader things of myself, the team, and the organization. That's always number one.
Yeah, that's well taken. In our class, in our first class, each and every year, each student gets up and tells their leadership story, gives a little bit of their narrative, the people, the circumstances, the coincidences, the mentors that they've had in their life. And I wanted you to just spend a few minutes talking about, some of the people in your life that have, brought the words out that you've given us today.
Well, probably first of all is my dad. He was a pro football player. He played 13 years in NFL, the Canadian Football League, the AFL. He was a journeyman pro football player. And, I admired my dad because of his work ethic. My dad had to work for everything in football. A little fun fact was my dad's the first African-American to start an NFL game at center, 1964 for the Denver Broncos. It was the first time a black center and a African-American quarterback started the same game, Marlon Briscoe, for the Denver Broncos. And, so my dad took me to practice with him back then in those days when I was 5, 6, 7 years old. And I've always been around the locker room my whole life. I kind of say I'm kind of like Forrest Gump a little bit. I've ended up in some places and that very few people have been at such a young age. I remember when I was 10 years old, Johnny Rodgers, who won the Heisman Trophy for Nebraska in 1972, played for the Montreal Alouettes, and he was friends with my dad. And when Johnny Rodgers would leave town, he would bring the Heisman Trophy over and give it to me to hold till he came back out of town. And I would put it in my room. And before I went to bed every night, I'd do 100 push-ups, or I'd go outside and do some type of drills to get better. And I would look at that Heisman Trophy and I'd say, that's what I want one day. And, my dad played for Marv Levy for the Montreal Alouettes. And when I was at the Houston Oilers playing football, Marv Levy, me and we're talking. He goes, "How's your dad doing? I remember you running around the field in Montreal." And I told your dad, that kid's kind of fast. And, being a water boy for the Dolphins with Mike Shula and and Coach Shula would say, "Alonzo, come on and sit in this meeting with these guys." I'm like, okay, I'm sitting in Don Shula, and also getting yelled at by Don Shula because
everybody got yelled at.
Yeah, I got yelled
Shula.
at because he didn't think I was putting the towels down with any conviction. And then meeting Howard Schnellenberger, who shaped my life, and I never understood Howard Schnellenberger till after he left. And I read the book Junction Boys, and then I saw the movie, and I said, "That's what Howard Schnellenberger is." And the biggest thing I learned from Howard Schnellenberger is you only need 22 players. Find me 22 guys where football means the world to them, and you'll have an opportunity to win. And of those 22, if each one of them can bring one guy with them, now we've got 44 guys. And if those guys can bring one guy with them, now we've got 85 guys on a team headed in the right direction. And work ethic. It's your life is nothing more than your work ethic. And I'm convinced of that. And I tell our kids at the University of Miami, there's a funny thing about life. It tends to give you exactly what you put into it. And I tell the stories of the players I brought to the Packers who came there as street free agents. Nobody knew their name, from Tremont Williams to Chris Banjos, and drafting Donald Driver in the 7th round. And I'm standing on the table for Donald Driver, and Ron Wolf says to me, "What's so special about him?" I said, "Well, he's the same guy as Michael Irvin, completely driven to succeed. And football means the world to him." And that's what built the University of Miami and built me in a lot of ways of how I think and the way I do things. Everything I do in life has got to be about my work ethic and the time I put into it. And does it mean anything to you? You know what? I tell these players all the time, if it doesn't mean anything to you, you can't be good. We've all seen talented players, but it just didn't mean that much to them. And I've seen players with not even a quarter of their talent become great players because it meant everything in the world to them. And, when you're scouting, trying to find players, I think about so many things when I'm looking at players, and talk to players for 10 minutes and 20 minutes, and you find out about that guy. You say, "You know what? I love this kid. This game means everything in the world to him." And if you can surround yourself with people whose life means something to them, their family means something to them, football means something to them, friendship means something to them, you'll be a much better person, and you surround yourself with people who will be successful. And if you can and when you bring that to your team, and you bring that, and you find 22 guys that this means the world to them, that you don't have to tell them to work hard. I don't have to tell you to do extra. I don't have to tell you to watch film. They're already in there.
Yeah, you don't have to motivate them to practice. I always ask one question: do you love to practice?
Yep.
Because if I have to pull teeth and be a dentist to get you to practice, you're not the kind of guy we want to have.
I've never seen a great player that didn't love to practice.
Didn't want discipline, didn't want an itinerary, didn't want somebody to, help them master their craft, right?
I've never seen a great attorney or doctor that didn't study.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, so football is a lot of things, and football is probably an unhumane sport because it's so violent and it takes so much out of your body. It can rob you of a lot of things, from injuries to your well-being. You have to love it, and it has to mean something to you, because it's going to take a lot from you. And guys, you can see guys, myself, I've got, knee replacement, I've got an ankle, I've got a bent finger, I've got a shoulder, no rotator cuff. But you know what? I do it all again twice, because the game means that much to me. And when you can find kids, the greatest thing about that University of Miami team that won the national championship. I don't think it was nearly as talented as some of the other Miami teams. But boy, I'd take it in a bar fight over anybody.
No doubt about it.
I would take those guys. If you said of all the University of Miami championship teams, you had to go to a bar fight, which one are you taking? I'm taking that 83 team. You know why? Because it would mean the world to them to win, and they're going to win any means necessary to win.
No, they had great leadership at multiple levels.
Multiple levels.
Yeah.
And, and I always give that team, we don't talk about that team much because it was, in life, we only know what we heard 2 days ago. And that team, people don't know, was the team that taught swag, what being confident was. I was shocked when I got to Miami, the attitudes of these guys, Tony Fitzpatrick, Jay Brophy, they didn't give a crap about nothing. They were tough as nails. You could run them all day. They didn't complain. As a matter of fact, they loved it. It didn't even bother them. Howard, they tell stories about Howard trying to run all of them off, but they kept coming back. You didn't have to ask Eddie Brown, will you switch positions? You didn't have to ask a guy like Reggie Sutton, will you go play corner? You didn't have to ask that. The game meant so much to those guys, and the team meant so much to them. They were doing it.
Yeah.
And that's how you win.
Yeah. Let me validate what you said earlier. I was sitting in the office with Coach Schnellenberger looking at Columbus High School play and watching Mike Shula. And then Howard in his scruffy voice said, run that back. And he pointed to you. And he goes, Mark, that's the best high school player in the country. So I want to validate that was actually the case back in probably 1981.
83.
83
yeah.
was
82.
82.
Yeah.
And you mentioned something I want to hit on. You really didn't learn what Howard Schnellenberger was all about until after you left. I want to transition because I want to cover Jimmy as well, because I was a young coach at the time as well. I really didn't know much about football at that time. And so Howard Schnellenberger was kind of the man I looked up to, the first mentor I ever had. The way he coached was a special way of coaching. And then Jimmy comes in, and remember Jimmy, from his standpoint, he had to keep the entire coaching staff. And that was a very difficult transition. I didn't really understand Jimmy's way. It was only till 10 or 12 years after that I reconnected with Jimmy and really respected and grew to love him for the way he coached the team. But two different guys. You want to talk about their leadership?
Oh, man. And I was going to get into Jimmy after, but we went on to Howard Schnellenberger as my dad, Howard Schnellenberger, and then Jimmy Johnson. And the thing that amazed me about Jimmy Johnson, why I think Jimmy Johnson's one of the all-time great coaches in football, Jimmy was about accountability, and he was about you being good at what you're supposed to do. There was nobody better. I believe Jimmy Johnson could have been a CEO at any company, Fortune 500 company in America. He had leadership. He demanded accountability. And it wasn't about you being the best player with Jimmy Johnson. It was about you doing what was required to do. Jimmy had a way of making superstars play to that ability. And that's what separated him from a lot of coaches. And Howard could do the same thing. But Jimmy was very dynamic in allowing you to be yourself and expecting you to play at a certain level. And the thing that I loved about Jimmy Johnson was the fact that if you were a hard worker and you did everything the right way, the guy playing next to you had to do the same thing too. There was no, we're not going to practice him today. He doesn't feel good. There were rules with Jimmy. You don't perform to a certain level, you won't play. You don't practice, you won't play. You don't go to class, you won't play. And if you're about accountability and you want to win, that's why I love Jimmy Johnson and Howard Schnellenberger, because they made it right for the guys who want to do it the right way.
They really did. Two things that come to mind is they empowered everybody around them. They didn't micromanage the team. They had responsibility to to run the team, but every coach and every player was expected to be accountable, and that was empowering. And when you have that kind of accountability, then you don't have to motivate as much because there's peer-to-peer accountability that I'm not going to let anybody down on either side of me today, and because I won't, they won't.
I will say this, Jimmy Johnson didn't put up with you not doing your job. Yeah, and put it this way. If you couldn't tackle, you couldn't make plays, and you weren't doing the right things, nothing could save you with Jimmy Johnson. You were out. And it was the same with Howard. And that's how I grew up. I don't understand people who don't do well at their job and continue playing. I don't understand that, because I've always believed that when you're a leader and when you're a starter, you play and practice to a certain level, right? And that guy behind you knows why you're the starter. You know what I mean?
Right, because there's communication.
He knows that in order for him to play for you, you have to do what he does and emulate his work ethic, his practice performance, and when you get a shot in the game, you do what you're supposed to do.
Yeah. And I was going to ask you one question with that. As hard and as tough as you make Coach Schnellenberger and Jimmy Johnson sound, I always felt they cared about me.
Oh, no.
You know, I always felt like everybody was empowered by him, felt accountable to the team, but also did feel cared about. Yep. I can remember one time Jimmy brought me into his office the first year, and I hardly knew him. And he got Gil Brandt on the phone because I wanted to coach in the NFL. Yep. I really didn't want to coach college football. And he got Gil Brandt on the phone to give me advice on what I should do. And I wound up staying another year with Jimmy and then going to the NFL the next year. So I think that's an important point, is they weren't just tough guys, fair guys, great communicators, but you also knew that they cared about your individual welfare, which I think is really important in today's world.
And that's what that gets lost in all this. Howard and Jimmy were very caring people. They cared as long as you cared. You know what I mean?
100%.
When you did all the right things, Jimmy used to say, I'm not concerned with you being a great player. You're going to help this team one way or another, but I do need you to do everything you're supposed to do: school, academics, the weight room, the training room, being a scout team player. If you did all those things with Howard and Jimmy, you were one of his guys. And it wasn't about, of course you have favorites because this guy's a superstar, but Jimmy did not, and Howard didn't devalue you. They respected you because you did everything the right way, and they had a soft spot for that.
Yeah.
They really did.
Yeah. Let's talk about something we've both had during the course of our winding journeys, and that is adversity. You know, there's been times in our lives where things haven't gone the way we wanted. We've been fired. We've had to move on from other jobs, and you've also seen others handle adversity. So, you know, in the winding road of life, we're going to have to deal with some really tough times. And I'm not really talking health issues and things like that. I'm talking about from a professional standpoint.
I mean, you know, I haven't dealt with adversity like some of my friends have dealt with adversity. I've had a couple of friends who've been fired 3, 4, 5 times. And, you know, I was in Green Bay for, you know, almost 20 years. And then I went to Cleveland, and that didn't work out when John Dorsey got fired. I was basically gone too. I wasn't staying there without John Dorsey. And then going to Seattle. But I have learned watching people how they handle adversity and how some of them made them better. I've talked to them. I've talked to people every year who had the unfortunate part of being fired in this business, and I've come to understand it through adversity that it's not where you start; it's where you finish. Your past doesn't define who you are. You're always trying to learn from your past mistakes, communicate better. Through adversity, you find out a lot about yourself, and you can sit and analyze yourself from the outside looking in. One of the greatest things I've learned to do when I was scouting, I probably started doing it the last 10 years. I did a lot of long drives in scouting. And at one point, I just stopped listening to music. I drove for hours, 4 hours, 3 hours with nothing. And I was able to think about my life. You know, if you just listen to music, you know, you've gotten in your car and you drive for 2 hours, you listen to this song, and then you get to where you're at, you're like, oh yeah, I'm here. You didn't think about anything. Well, what I started doing was, I wouldn't call it meditation because you got to drive. You got to stay focused on the road. But by turning off the music, I was able to go back in time and see myself in a different light. I was able to think about things I hadn't thought about since I was 9 years old. You know what I mean?
Exactly. That's kind of sitting back and going through your narrative.
Yep.
You know, how you got to where you were at that moment.
Exactly.
So give me 2 or 3 takeaways from those drives that resonate with you.
My first time I really just started listening to music, and this may seem like kind of weird, but I had misplaced some important papers that I really needed. And I could not find them. I mean, I really needed them. And because if I didn't have them, it was something on a finance part that I really needed it. And I had no clue where they were for like 3 years. So I said, let me turn this music off and think. And I drove for 2.5 hours, and I found exactly where they were. I was able to clear my mind. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. At some point in life, you have to be able to clear your mind in order to see clear. And with all the music that was going on, talking to my wife on the phone, talking to this scout on the phone, I got to stop and get gas. Every time I thought about where those papers were, I was right back where I started again. I don't know. So by being able to drive with no music, I was able to see players. I was able to see mistakes I've made and where I need to fix those mistakes. And it was all clearing your mind. I think what a lot of things we don't do in life is we don't clear our minds. We continually add to it. And then at the end of the day, there's so much in your mind, you forget what you were thinking about.
Yeah, in our class, we use the term pause. Mm-hmm. We don't pause to really reconnect with ourselves and reconfirm our values and our purpose and the things that, make life meaningful.
Exactly. So I started making these long drives and I found my purpose.
And what is that? What is that? Can you put it into words?
Yeah. My purpose in life has always been to be a difference to people. A couple things brought tears in my eyes growing up because I always used to like to protect people growing up, and I used to beat up bullies. And I would find out in the park, I saw there was a kid named Jawaha one time, and Indian kid, nice kid. We were always his nose was always running, and people picked on him. And I was walking out of school. I was in the 6th grade, and I saw him. Had kind of like a bloody nose. He was crying, and it was snowing because I grew up in Canada. And I said, "What happened?" He said, "Those guys beat me up." So I went over and beat all 3 of them up. And I told him, if I ever see you guys bother him again, it's going to be bad for you. And I beat them up. I got suspended from school for a day, but it was worth it.
Yeah, I think that purpose, just kind of define purpose isn't about you.
Yeah.
It's about using your platform to do for others and to give to others. And I think that's what people lose sight of. It's not about feeding your family or building a house. It's what can I do? And you've said that throughout this hours. It's helping people and being selfless in doing so.
I feel so glad when I see friends in the business and they tell me, "Hey, Alonzo helped me get this job," or former players who say, "Man, Alonzo believed in me, and
How about boxing? Give us a little soundbite on boxing. That was part of your. It's been a part of your journey, right?
Yeah,
how did you get into it, and what did you learn from it?
I learned that I'm crazy. And like my mother said, you must have had nothing better else to do. I know you. And so the boxing part was I got through with football, and I always loved boxing. And I think my dad wanted me to be a boxer, but and Mom wouldn't have any of that. So I used to always mess around in the gym, and I got to meet Angelo Dundee through Joe Brodsky. And I went over to
former running back coach.
Exactly.
One of our mentors.
One of the best of all time.
Yeah.
And
funniest of all time, that's for sure.
The most sarcastic coach. I thought they should, if Joe Brodsky was around today, he'd have his own reality show at the running back position.
We could do an hour on Joe.
The things he told us in meetings about ourselves, I used to just laugh and say, back then it was funny. And the bigger the crowd watching practice, the bigger the performance. Joe Brodsky, great running back coach, great man, another mentor.
Yeah, for both of us.
For both of us. And, so I love that man. He was a great man. But as far as the boxing thing, I went to the gym one day, and a guy said, well, you want to train boxing? I said, yeah, who can teach me? The guy showed me this one trainer named Al Bolden. His nickname was Potato Pie. He'd been like he trained Iran Barkley, Thomas. I mean, he trained a lot of fighters. So I just started coming to the gym every day. He said, you keep coming back. You want to fight? I said, nah, I'll just like it. I'm competitive and I want to try and get good at it. And I kept sparring. Then I got in the ring sparring with professionals. And then one guy told me, you should have a fight. I'm like, really? He goes, yeah, you should have one fight. Yeah, I'll do one and I'll be in of it. Well, I didn't know it was going to lead to 29. And, I met a lot of great people in boxing. And my dad was a storyteller. Like, my friends can sit around my dad for hours telling you about stories. I'm sort of a storyteller.
Sure.
And Angelo Dundee was the greatest storyteller of all time. I got to meet him, and I would sit.
Muhammad Ali's trainer.
Oh, yeah, Muhammad Ali's trainer. And he would tell me stories about Ali that were just fascinating, Sugar Ray Leonard and all these people. And, so I got into boxing. I met, fought on, and since I played football, I had a little celebrity in me. They let me fight on big shows. I fought in Argentina. I fought in Japan. I fought on George Foreman shows. I fought on Sugar Ray Leonard was putting on fights. I fought on Oscar De La Hoya. I've fought in Caesar's Palace, MGM. So I am Forrest Gump. It's when I tell people all this stuff, they're like, "Wow, that's pretty cool." And then my last fight, I lost, and I was getting ready I signed a contract to fight George Foreman. Me and George Foreman were going to fight in Houston Astrodome. He had never fought in Houston his whole pro career, and he's from Houston. And I signed the contract and everything. And when the fight didn't come off, I just said, you know what? I had a good time. Let me get into scouting now. And I went into scouting right away.
Bottom line of boxing, one takeaway from boxing over your time. That's contributed to who you are today.
I would probably say persistence. And boxing's a sport. Always bet on the guy who had to train for the fight. You know what I mean? But the guy who does it consistently every day, who doesn't have to train for the fight because he lives his lifestyle for that moment, that's the guy I'm betting on.
Yeah, he pays attention to the process, right? The daily practice every day, the walkthrough, the meetings.
He doesn't do the balloon up 60 pounds.
Right.
And then he has to train.
Right. It's a lifestyle.
It's a lifestyle.
Yeah.
So I would probably say consistency.
Yeah, that's good.
Consistency.
Well, let's go full circle here.
Okay.
Let's wind it down. Yeah. You're now, after all of this, 40 years, you're general manager of football operations for the University of Miami. You've done it all.
Yep.
And now you're here. Can you tell us a little bit about your role and your vision for it? And then maybe we can just finish up with your feelings about where the University of Miami is going to go with their football program.
Yeah. I had no idea I'd ever come back to University of Miami, especially in the role I'm in right now. I love pro football. I love the people I work with. I only had one bad experience, and that was in Cleveland and trying to change a culture in Cleveland. I thought we made an impact in the short time I was there. And, like a lot of people in this sport, you don't get enough time. But to be in Green Bay for 19 years, go to Cleveland for 2, and then go to Seattle for 3 years with John Schneider, who came from Green Bay. It was exactly what I always thought football was because of philosophies from Ron Wolf.
Can you talk about that before we move to UM? A little bit about Seattle and culturally what it looked like.
Yeah, Green Bay and Seattle were the same culture because Ron Wolf built the Green Bay Packers, and John Schneider was a disciple of Ron Wolf. And all his teachings about the organization, kindness, it all starts at the top of the food chain in order for us to be successful, and it filters on down, and you build a strong foundation of respect, always doing what's best for the organization. There is no me, there is no I. It's all about the team and the organization. We treat everyone with respect. Everyone's important, and you do your job. I loved working there. Ron Wolf was probably, I didn't get a chance to talk about him, one of my biggest mentors of all in pro football. I met Ron Wolf. He hired me and gave me an opportunity in pro football. And the things I learned from him about Ron Wolf's a fascinating man. He's in the Hall of Fame. He's been scouting from the 60s and 70s and, built 3 different teams to go to the Super Bowl. And so the knowledge that I learned from him, I can't even, can't pay for it.
Yeah, I think what the point you make about everybody in the organization is interconnected, and really what they do and what they say matters and affects winning on game day.
Exactly.
And that's the critical part of leadership. I found the most exciting is sending the messaging of saying the same thing every day, different ways. And you do that because you understand the people that are working there and the communication necessary to reach them and to show them you care. I think that's so huge. And I think you found that in Green Bay and in Seattle.
Yeah, I found that. And then going back to Seattle with John Schneider and Pete Carroll, phenomenal people. It was such a joy to go to work every day because it was fun. I mean, Pete rides those little scooters in the hallway people ride on campus. That's what he rides in the building. All the coaches do. It's I love working in a place where people say good morning.
Look in the eye, wait for an answer.
Wait for an answer.
Ask you how you're doing.
And then, John Schneider starts every day off with a skit from Saturday Night Live on the video. And what a tremendous
sense of humor. Important in a winning organization.
Laughs at himself. And nothing better than people who can laugh at themselves.
Self-deprecating is key.
Yeah.
And humility, as you said, is so big. So what's going on here at UM? Tell me about your first few months on the job.
Well, I've been on the job. I started working June 1st, and it's a pleasure to be back. And I didn't realize how much I missed Miami until I came back to Miami. And I came back because I honestly believe Mario Cristobal is the right guy for this program. Dan Radakovich, the athletic director, I'm a huge fan of his. I enjoy working with him daily and talking to him. He's built programs. He's been around championships at Miami and at Clemson. I know he's been at Georgia Tech. He's seen it all. And
so have you.
Yeah, I've seen it all.
You've traveled the country, and you've been in Nick Saban's office and Dabo Swinney's office. I mean, your perspective of what a national championship team looks like as a player, as a scout, and personnel, it just seems like a perfect match.
Yeah, it is a perfect match. And, My main job is basically making sure that Mario's message gets throughout the building. Making sure we identify the right kids to be at Miami. Making sure that working with Dan Radakovich, that everyone in the building is of importance, and there's urgency in the building to win. Mm-hmm. There has to be a passion and urgency to win. We all know how important winning is, but there has to be a dynamic where every day, everything we do, it's all about University of Miami. It's all about the football team. It's all about the soccer team. Whatever endeavor, whatever sport it is, it has to be all about that. And everything we do is for the good of that organization, that particular sport. And that's what I talked to Dan Radakovich about. And it's about building a foundation. I think since our last national championship, I think our foundation was cracked. I think we've been trying to build on top of a broken foundation, and we all know that doesn't work. And we have to fix the foundation. And the only way you can fix the foundation is bringing in the right type of kids. I'm talking about the type of kids where football, it means the world to them. Because if football means the world to you, you'll do all the other things the right way. You'll go to class. You'll work hard. You'll do all the extra things to be good because football means that much to you. And I always go back to family, like being a father. If I had to work 3 jobs or 5 jobs for my family, that's what I would do because they mean that much to me. You can't tell me football means a lot to you and you don't do extra. You can tell me that, how much you like. If you just do what you're supposed to do, you're just like every other common 180 teams playing football. So finding those type of kids that have the right pedigree to be Miami Hurricanes and deserve to be, and take it as an honor. You know what I mean? They take great pride in the fact that they played at the University of Miami. They don't take it for granted. You know what I mean? It means something to you. And if we can find those kids, 22 of them, if we can find 22, we'll get back to winning. And this organization, this program will get back on the right track. But the foundation has to be solid down here. And that's what I'm working with Mario on, is making sure we build this foundation the right way.
I saw you speak a few months back and how you just wanted a couch in your office so the players could come by.
Yeah.
And did you ever get that couch?
No, office in the new building I will.
Tell us about that couch you've envisioned.
Well, you know what? My reputation in NFL, former players always tell you, man, Zoe's real. He's going to tell you the truth. I'm never going to lie to a young man. And I can say this, that every player that's listening to me verbatim is a millionaire. And there's a process, there's a way of doing things. And if you're just willing to listen, like I listened to Johnny Rodgers, I listened to Don Shula. If you listen and follow the path, you can be successful. And I always tell players this when they come in my room and I tell them about what hard work does for you. I always tell them this. Imagine the NFL's a 32-story building, 32 teams. There's a team on each floor. Tom Brady and Aaron Donald, all these guys are on the top floor, right? They've earned their due. That's who they are. If you get in the building, the view's not bad from the second floor. I want you to get in that building. I want you to have that opportunity to hand your keys to the LA guy because you're in that building that so few people get an opportunity to. And I tell young men all the time, I hope you're coming to college to be a first-round draft pick one day. I don't want you to shy away from that because you know why? Because if that's your goal, you'll do everything you can to get there. And you may fall short, but guess where you land? In that building where you wanted to be. And then you work your way up again in the building to move up a floor, move up till you're at the top of the pedestal. You've played 12 years, met a beautiful wife. Your family's life has changed forever. That's what this can do for you. Why wouldn't you give yourself the ultimate option? I could be an attorney. I can go to school. I can be a professional football player as well. Why wouldn't you want all of that? You know what I mean? Why waste your time here just to be average? Why wouldn't you do everything in your God willing to say, I want to be great. I want to work every single day to be something in this job. You know, I want to be good. And, you know, that's my message to kids. I'm more concerned about you than the University of Miami. You know what I mean? Because there's a saying in this business, you're necessary until the day they deem you unnecessary. And whether you're ready or not, when you're unnecessary, you're gone. And you know what? If you know the rules of the game, it's easy. My job is to come here in college, get my college degree, be the best damn football player I can be, and then move on. That's life.
Yeah.
If you think you're coming to school to do them a favor, I left here in 1987, they're still playing football. They'll be playing with or without you. And if you understand that, this game's easy. But I do want you to explore all your options and be the best in every single one of them.
Alonzo, the University of Miami is really lucky to have you. It's been an honor and a privilege to spend the hour with you, and can't thank you enough for joining us today.
It's a pleasure. One last person I didn't mention was, of course, my mother and Coach Dennis Lavelle, my high school coach. And if you know Mario, and you know me, and you know Dennis Lavelle, you understand where we come from. And it's just work ethic, and it's positivity. It's about making sure everyone feels part of it, and it's about giving more of yourself. And if you can give more of yourself in life to people, we'll be a better society.
Beautiful. Thanks again.
Thanks go out to our executive producer, Greg Levy, Associate Dean and Director of the Entertainment, Arts, and Sports Law Program at the University of Miami School of Law. I want to also thank our engineer and editor, Christopher Elzadi, our theme music from Calyptra, and special acknowledgement to our research assistant, Nick Rossi, a fellow attorney and student who's done a great job in our preparation.